Myth of Empires is an immersive sandbox RPG where players brave the elements, form alliances, and fight against enemies as they build up their very own empire. We're talking to Leon Meng, a producer on Myth of Empires, and Lionel Lee, the lead game designer, to find out more about this sandbox survival game presented by Angela Game. Welcome, gentlemen. Can you introduce yourselves and tell us what you do?
Hello, 大家好.
Hello everyone, I'm Leon Meng, producer on the Myth of Empires project. I'm responsible for managing the development and design of Myth of Empires.
大家好.
Hello everyone, I'm Lionel Lee, lead game design on the Myth of Empires project. I'm in charge of designing the gameplay of Myth of Empires.
Now, can you both tell me what is Myth of Empires?
Myth of Empires is a survival sandbox game based around ancient era combat. Its map is 64 square kilometers in size and features a variety of different environments, such as mountains, deserts, jungle, and swamps. Each of these environments has its own animals. In addition, there are also 6 major human NPC factions that compete and interact with players. The game gives the players opportunity to participate in every part of the warfare process, from collecting resources, to transportation, to crafting war materials, to building fortresses that can help them protect these materials. In the later stages of the game, players will be able to implement and enact strategic and political policies as well.
Now, Leon, what was the initial idea behind the making of this game?
When we first discussed the project, the original idea was to make a game that reflected warfare in ancient China. However, we didn't want to do the same thing that other projects with similar themes were doing. We wanted to do it with a different type of gameplay, and bring players a more immersive experience with a higher degree of freedom. I'm personally a fan of ancient war games, and I play a lot of games with this kind of theme. Some of the games currently on the market are purely competitive games with an emphasis on combat. Some are strategy games that emphasize strategy and tactics. Our idea is to make a game that allows players to participate in the entire ancient warfare process, from gathering materials and building camps to fighting on the battlefield.
Can you tell us how the game is different from other sandbox survival titles?
First of all, Myth of Empires is a realistic game built around combat from the ancient era. In order to make it as realistic as possible, we referred to many historical documents to bring to life the way people would live and fight back then. I think in this respect, it will be a new experience for Western players. Myth of Empires' PvE and PvP crossover mechanics reduce the frustration of traditional sandbox games, allowing players with different tastes to choose how they want to play the game. There's also a guild system and a world map with strategic elements, which establishes some long-term sandbox gameplay. The design of the in-game world's link servers give it a cohesive and interactive feel.
What experiences can players expect to have in Myth of Empires?
Players can explore different environments, fight wild animals and bandits in order to survive, and acquire resources to build their own bases. You can recruit or capture NPCs as subordinates, tame, raise, and breed horses to obtain high-quality mounts, and also farm livestock and plant crops. Of course, you can also choose whether to cooperate or compete with other players for additional fun.
As a survival sandbox, there seems to be a lot of freedom in playstyle options. Do you have any playstyle recommendations for newcomers to the game?
Due to the high degree of freedom in the game, novice players can easily lose their way while playing. My suggestion is that novice players gradually familiarize themselves with the game mechanics on the PvE servers and not immediately jump into PvP. Novices can also complete quests to learn about the game mechanics. If you run into stuff that you don't understand, you can refer to our wiki, which is in progress. Finally, we recommend that players find a few friends to play with, which will make the game easier and more fun. Of course, if you want to play by yourself casually, you can get your own private server and adjust game parameters and permissions to reduce the difficulty of the game and strike a balance that suits you personally.
Can you tell us about any NPCs in the game and how players can interact with them?
NPCs in the game largely fall into 2 categories. One is human NPCs and the other is wild animals. These NPCs are mainly hostile to the player at the start of the game. Players will need to fight these NPCs to gather resources. As the game progresses, most of the human-type NPCs in the game can be subdued to become your subordinates. You can let them fight for you, collect materials, build equipment, and control various equipment for you. Most of the animals in the game can also be captured. Some can be your mounts, some can help you fight, some can look after your base, and some can help you with farming. In addition, the NPCs in Myth of Empires all belong to their own factions. If you frequently attack them, your relationship will become hostile, and they may retaliate. Sometimes they will chase you down, and sometimes they will attack your base directly. Of course, in addition to hostile interactions, there are also ways to cooperate with them. Players can make a profit by transporting goods between different factions. These are just some of the examples of ways to interact with NPCs. players will need to experiment for themselves to discover the other ways.
There's a focus on character personal growth paths. What kind of options will players have access to?
Myth of Empires provides players with a wealth of different ways to grow their characters. There are 25 different skill trees and over 100 perks. You can choose to become a swordsman, cavalier, archer, crossbowman, farmer, blacksmith, builder, etc. Players can improve their training efficiency in a certain skill by assigning specialization points. They can also respec these specializations as needed. In the later stages, players will have a wide set of skills. To improve these skills, you will have to perform the related actions. For example, when attacked, your HP and armor skills will increase. Firing arrows will improve your skill with bows. Planting crops will improve your planting skill, and crafting items will improve your crafting skill. There's a lot of freedom here, and players have the room to experiment with different skills and get creative.
Do you have any growth paths that you like to follow?
Personally, I do lots of resource collection and building in the early stages. With a secure base, I can then level up more quickly. Then I dive into the fighting. I really like the feel of riding horses and then using the directional attacks to fight enemy cavalry, so I tend to level up my cavalry skills. Then, it's important to recruit NPCs. I like to recruit lots of them, give them creative names, and have them do work for me. For example, I have them follow me into battle, farm the land for me, gather supplies, man defensive structures, and guard my base.
Now, Lionel, how else can players customize their characters?
In terms of differentiation, I think NPCs and horses should be mentioned. First of all, each NPC has its own different characteristics, which can be good or bad. For example, some NPCs are particularly good at fighting certain other kinds of NPCs. Some NPCs are afraid of animals, and some suffer leg injuries more frequently. Players will need to help NPCs overcome their weaknesses, thereby improving their combat capabilities. As for horses, they have a variety of natural skills, which can be passed on to the next generation through breeding. Through generation after generation of breeding, you can help pass on the different excellent skills of different horses onto a single horse to create a really powerful mount.
Players will be able to explore a large world server that includes both PvE and PvP. Can you tell us some more about how that works?
The game's world is a huge territory composed of many counties. There are 16 cities in each county, plus PvE and PvP servers. All players start on the PvE server and can then transfer to a PvP server through the use of special buildings once they reach a certain level. PvP servers offer higher collection efficiency and greater probability of obtaining rare resources.
What sort of PvE obstacles will players face in Myth of Empires?
In the early PvE stages, the main challenges players will face are wild animal and bandit attacks, as well as survival. In the later stages, they will need to manage their base to obtain better resources and challenge elite enemies in NPC camps and secret caves.
Players will need to engage in large-scale warfare to expand their empire. What tools can players use to get an advantage in combat?
Battles are similar to what they were like in ancient times. Before two sides clash, catapults and ballistas play a major role at long distances. In the open plains, cavalry are powerful, but on complex terrain and within city walls, infantry and archers play the largest role. To win a battle, there must be a clear division of responsibilities and a unified and effective guild command.
How can players form alliances?
The game takes place in a special historical period. The emperor has lost his authority, and he's largely a figurehead. The people under his command operate largely on their own, but still need his authorization for major actions. In order to restore the political background of the time, there is a more feudal relationship between different alliances. A guild can only form an alliance with another guild through subordination. In this respect, it's similar to a medieval European system. The duke joins the kingdom, and the kingdom joins the empire, but this kind of allegiance is fragile.
And can you tell us how alliances affect combat?
The huge in-game territory means lots of guilds will be trying to occupy and maintain it. The county head of each server controls the tax revenue within the server. Then the 16 county heads will need to determine the leader of the prefecture, who will determine who will protect passes to maintain control of the entire region. More allies means that you can fight more wars at the same time, and you can control a larger territory. But if these allies defect, then the empire falls apart. It takes a lot to manage an entire empire, and there is a lot of diplomacy involved.
What other features can players take advantage of to improve their combat strength?
Just like real warfare, you will need to have a strong line of production to ensure access to food, horses, weapons, ammo, and other materials. Secondly, well-trained warriors are needed to function as cavalry, infantry, ranged units, and siege units. Finally, excellent command skills are required in the heat of battle.
Thank you so much for your time, Leon and Lionel.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Ready to build your own empire? Then gather your friends and allies to start forming battle plans, because this immersive sandbox RPG, Myth of Empires, is available now on Steam in early access. What personal growth paths are you most excited about? Let us know in the comments below, and thanks so much for watching, and for everything else Myth of Empires, keep it right here on IGN.